Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone joining our third and final mentor session on the Aging Better with ICTs Hackathon. For those who I did not meet yesterday, my name is Tala Debs. I work for the World Summit on the Information Society, WISIS Forum 2021, which is a UN multi-stakeholder process aimed at promoting the importance of the usage of ICTs as an enabler to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I coordinate, among other activities, the first ever WISIS online hackathon that was launched this year in close collaboration with the Global Coalition on Aging, GCOA, and other WISIS stakeholders. The Aging Better with ICTs hackathon has officially started actually on March 15, and I'm really happy to inform you today that we've reached this morning more than 1,000 participants, where teams between 2 to 5 members are currently ideating solutions to address four of the challenges faced by older persons today. There are Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline, frailty, financial tools for longevity, and transportation and mobility. So I would like to quickly present to you our agenda for today. We are really honored to have a great panel of experts in the technology of aging and with us today. So we will start by a quick roundtable of introductions where each mentor will be given the opportunity to highlight between 2 to 3 minutes their expertise. Then each mentor will be placed in a virtual breakout room. My colleague Karen here will be sending you to these breakout rooms after the introduction. And then you will be joined by hackers who are working on a theme that is similar to your field of expertise, and they will be able to ask questions to you. So to simplify the logistics, may I ask all the hackers present here to please type in next to your name the challenge you've chosen to hack for so we can better assign you to a mentor's room. And of course, you can always come back to the lobby and have the opportunity to speak with many mentors today, because this is a rare occasion where we have experts with us gathered in one virtual room, if I would say. So without further delay, I would like to hand over to Nancy Hodin, who will start the introduction of the mentors. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I would like to welcome everyone here, and a special thank you to all the mentors who have participated today and in earlier days this week. It's really been a pleasure, and we've been honored to have your participation. What I'd like to do as a way to introduce the hackers to all of you is to ask you each a brief question about things that you're doing and your background. And I think that might be able to help people better understand where your specialties lie. And I'm going to start with Mary. Hi, Mary. Nice to see
Hi, Nancy.
you.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here and hopefully to help some of these great groups. So I'm Mary Cronin. I am a professor in management at Boston College in Boston, Massachusetts. My passion for older founders and solving the problems of aging include, I'm a member of a group here called Founders Over 55. Also started my own company called 4Q Catalyst, which is to address through innovation and invention some of the challenges of aging. And in that context, I've done work on voice-based services and wireless and digital implementations. I'm also currently the director of a program for intergenerational writing and storytelling to provide structures for older adults to share their stories and create legacies and overcome social isolation, called Write the Family. So that's my background, and happy to talk about any of those areas or whatever else people are interested in.
Well, you have an incredible background, and you sort of cut me off at the pass here, as they say, because I was going to give that same introduction of you, but thank you much more eloquently than me. But I do have a question for you, which I think might help the mentors think about your background more. And the question is kind of a collective question of all the things that you're doing. And in the area of aging tech, what do you see as sort of the most opportunity for innovation and commercialization right now? Again, a slice in time, not, just off the cuff.
Okay, for me, and admittedly, this is what I'm involved in, so it's my particular perspective, Nancy. It's voice-based services of various kinds. I think that overcomes some of the issues of the interface for older adults and enables a lot of innovation in the technology and delivery.
That's great. Are you familiar with the company Voice It, by the way?
Yes.
Because Sarah Smoley has been on some of our panels too, and I could put you together with her. They're doing a lot of interesting things in that area too.
I agree. Thank you.
I would be happy to. Well, thank you. And next, I'd like to go to Jay Olshansky. So,
Sure.
hi, Jay.
Yep.
Jay's outside in warm Chicago. Wonderful, wonderful to see you, and wonderful that you're participating again in this area. For us, in Jay's specialty, if you'd like to talk about it yourself, but it's really in longevity. And maybe you'd like to explain a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm a professor of public health at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I've been there about 21 years. Prior to that, 10 years in the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Chicago. My expertise is aging, longevity, estimating duration of life. I'm the co-founder and chief scientist of a company called Lapidus Solutions. We were founded in 2015. Things are picking up pretty rapidly now due to COVID. It has to do with combining the biological sciences with engineering, using facial analytics to assess risk at the individual level. And then I'm heavily involved in a company called MyWellspan.com, which is launching this month, which is focused on wealth management and utilizing technology to do rapid assessment, hyper-personalized rapid assessment of risk, which can be used both for life insurance, health insurance, rapid underwriting, completely frictionless. So it's, utilizing our scientific background to hopefully change the way in which older individuals interact with technology.
Thank you so much. Part of my question to you is really kind of explained through the projects that you're working on. And I wanted to ask you if there was one way that you felt technology had impacted people's possibilities of longevity. Obviously, your projects are part of that, but if you thought of one thing that sort of focused on longevity in technology together.
Oh goodness, that's pretty broad. Let me just say that science is on the verge of a breakthrough in aging biology. You're going to hear about it probably within the next month or so. That has the potential to alter the landscape of aging and longevity in the future. I'm also heavily involved in a program that I developed back in, it was about 15, 16 years ago, called the Longevity Dividend Initiative, which is this global effort to slow the biological process of aging as a new way of improving public health going forward, and getting people to understand the importance of this technology and how valuable it can be to improving health and quality of life among future older cohorts is the challenge. And then, of course, we all have to link up to these new technologies that are being developed, mostly involving remote sensors and remote assessments and whatnot. So the world is going through rapid evolutionary change right now, in part influenced heavily by COVID. Not sure if I answered your question, but there's a lot going on right now, and it's a lot of fun, and it's exciting to be involved in this area.
Well, thank you so much. You actually did. And more than that, you've sort of set the landscape for all the hackers here who have on their own seen that this is an interesting area for them to be focused on. And, we're very grateful to your leadership in this area, and obviously showing these young people and whomever else is hacking the potentials that can be developed through technology and longevity. So now I'd like to thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn over to Lisa Gergon, who's the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Home Care Association. And thank you again, Lisa, for coming back to us today and participating. I want to go back to something that you spoke about yesterday, and you talked about assessment and common scales and the importance of that. Yeah. Perhaps you can tell the mentors a little bit about your background and why you think that's important. Why would you like to see technology as your work with home care companies and home care people and caregivers? Why do you think that that's important? And maybe talk about what type of technology in your mind is better because of your point before about accessibility.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much again for having me. Appreciated being here yesterday, and really look forward to speaking to the generation of hackers on this call who are interested in this space. So important to have people focusing on aging. Yeah, so I think I come with a different lens. I work for Mass Home Care, and we provide care to over 60,000 older adults in Massachusetts who are really the most frail. About a third of them are actually eligible for nursing home care and decide they want to stay in their home. So I think for me, it's really important to think about ways that technology can interface with what happens in the home, in terms of providing, information from both the consumer or the client, the patient, and their loved one, their family member, and then bringing that information back to the clinical components of their care, so their doctor or their social worker. I think there's just a lot of missed opportunity in terms of sharing information and data. That I think is really essential. So we're certainly interested in solutions that can help with that, facilitate communication, because we know today that healthcare is much more than just what happens in a doctor's office, and those social determinants of health are so important. So technology that can really help facilitate that communication and address some of the other issues that we're seeing right now, especially with COVID, like social isolation. And then the other point I made yesterday, which I am so passionate about, is just the affordability and accessibility of these technologies. I think there's lots of innovation in this space, and it's great, but a lot of it is, really focused in the private pay market, and how do we scale these interventions to really be affordable for lots of people. And then, of course, the digital divide and broadband training for people. I talked a lot about yesterday, not just offering a technology, but how do we train some of the consumers that I serve that are the most frail people, how we help them so they can use technology as well.
Thank you so much. So obviously there's a lot of room for innovation here, for young people to start thinking about how they would bring technology to a different audience than perhaps they're used to thinking about. And I think that accessibility issue is really important. It's not just about big buttons, it's about other things that come in to play there too. Big buttons are important. I should say big font is important. I'm going to bring that to Chad, actually. Chad's going to be our next speaker. Chad is the Vice President of Healthcare Transformation at Home Instead. Nice to see you again, Chad. Chad was here yesterday again with another group of hackers, and really appreciate your work with us, and then in general Home Instead, which is I would say one of the largest home care companies in the world. It's a global organization, and have been in business for many years from Omaha, Nebraska. So we have yet another geography that is being represented in the Midwest today. I wanted to follow up on what you talked about a little bit yesterday, Chad, too. You talked about constraints of care, and it's something that Lisa is implying too in her comments. And I assume that also means for your professional caregivers. So if you could, in some short, brief way, tell me how Home Instead is using technology to even out the opportunities for professional caregivers, for people to come into this field and for them to excel.
Thank you, Nancy. Great question. Yeah, so much of the constraints that we face involve the actual caregiver. And, historically that has been done through people. And given what we know about the age wave, that's really a non-sustainable approach to continue just to recruit more and more caregivers. So it is ensuring that the workforce is supported and with professional standards, with training, which I think we do that as well as anybody in the world in terms of our home care platform. But it's also about how we can expand those skills and bring in other professionals. So when I think about some of the technologies that exist out there, I look on the horizon, a week doesn't go by that I'm not talking about biometric monitoring and doing a lot of digital tools that enable particularly a non-licensed caregiver to do some minimal amount of clinical activity, or at least monitoring of our clients, of the seniors that we're caring for. But I talk about it a little bit from the standpoint of, maybe you start that with an analog approach, and how do you bring a nurse into this model more and more, who can oversee and delegate some of the care to the non-licensed staff, which gets us down a pathway to where I think some of those biometric tools that are becoming more and more available as technology improves, to really do more in the home. My belief is healthcare. I've worked in healthcare for 30 years. Part of why I joined Home Instead was just this belief that healthcare is coming full circle. Until the late 1800s, all healthcare was provided in the home. It wasn't until anesthesia and infection control practices that we began building hospitals, and that's where people went to get their care to be delivered. And I just see more and more disruptors and technology that will enable that to return full circle back to the home, much like banking has in many places around the world. So I'd be encouraged to talk more about how we enable technology to expand the capacity to care for people at scale in the home.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important, two important points that you bring up. Not only that we are, at a point where there are so many more older people in the world, so that puts more pressure on the population of caregivers and people coming through to be caregivers. It's a wonderful opportunity for somebody seeking employment coming up. But there, as you said, it's not sustainable without that technology helping to support the caregivers, and maybe even integrating primary care through nursing into the mix. So now I'm going to turn to more of a medical focus and introduce Dr. Vera Malkovich, excuse my voice, Dr. Vera Malkovich, excuse me, Vera, I hope you don't.
That's absolutely fine.
It's also a little bubble in my throat. Thank you again for joining us today. Again, your focus is on Alzheimer's and digital technology, and you are part of the team at Eli Lilly. We're really thrilled to have you here. And we spoke last week about the role of technology in early detection for Alzheimer's and the treatment of patients with advanced stages. And I want to encourage everyone, we will be posting the video from the first mentor session for everyone to take a look at. And I think that, as we said before, our hackers are not going to develop therapies. That's not what they're doing here today, but it is interesting for them to know how technology is being used in the pharmaceutical industry as a way to speed up the development of therapies. I think we're all aware of what happened with COVID and how the technology was there on the shelf waiting for the people to create vaccines from them. But perhaps you can tell me how that's working at Eli Lilly too.
Technology has a tremendous potential. I think we're all aware of that. And that's why we're so excited about it and working in this space. I think there are, it has a different promise in different areas. One of the I think really promising venues that people have used is in fact in the clinical work. And that has been in terms of making sure that that you understand, not, you don't just get from the patient what they say, but also get some objective measurements of information. And those have been used, I think, some physicians have used them very, very successfully, and you put some sensors on a person, and then you sort of watch how they move during the day and what they do, and that has been incredibly helpful in understanding and being able to help a diagnosis. When it comes to digital technology on a larger scale, that becomes increasingly difficult. There are several dimensions that we can look into. One is just interacting with a patient, and that I think has been something that during the COVID times has just exploded. So the televisits, right? So, doing visits remotely to the extent it's possible to do that and so on has been very much welcomed. And there are a lot of things that we can do with that. And then there is the actually using technology in order to understand, to kind of augment what we would normally get from a patient in something like a self-reported, patient-reported outcome, right? So some of these things in patient-reported outcomes, we ask people, and people's brains are the computers that kind of crunch all the information. And so when we ask how much has it impacted you, well, in what dimensions, right? If we put a sensor on somebody, that sensor is going to look at a very particular behavior, which may be extremely different across different people. And so people crunch all of these things up and say, well, to me, this is how it has affected me. And then I can give you a response based on my life and based on my normal behaviors and what I can and cannot do now, or how a drug has helped me. And when we put a sensor on, we cannot do that. What we can do, however, is, first of all, there is a lot of research that remains to be done, which is why I think, having the help of people trying to produce solutions out of box and trying to figure out how these things are happening is incredibly helpful. But what it does do is that the technology, at least for now, is going to augment these reports by patients that are these subjective reports, and they're going to add to this information by saying, well, this is how you say that you slept, for example, and this is what a measurement of sleep says, and how do those things mash up? So I think at the moment, from what the kinds of things that I go, the kind of meetings I go to, and so on, the groups that I talk to, we're not talking about substituting primary endpoints, so the main measurements on which the drugs are approved, not yet. But what we are doing is producing this information that is going to say, we're seeing this, and this is supported by an objective measurement, which is then, of course, much more powerful because it can give us more detail. It can give us a better sense of how large those effects are, and so on. So I think, that is, at the moment, that is the direction that we're going to. We're augmenting the personal experience or other primary endpoints, objective primary endpoints. But the digital devices and sensors and so on are right now still exploratory, but of course, we all start with exploratory and going ahead. What is interesting, I find, is that both FDA here in the US and EMA in the regulatory agency in Europe are very interested in talking about these developments. And they always say, you want to do this, come and talk to us and let's work through this together. And in fact, in Europe, there are large European innovative medicine initiatives, and the way that they approach projects, they're smaller projects, but extremely well characterized. And they immediately start talking to the clinical people, the health professionals, they start talking to the regulatory, they start talking to patient representatives. And so in fact, they already have, like, even before they start, they say, where are we going to go and how, what is the measure supposed to look like? And so I think that approach has been very helpful. And they actually have used some of these digital innovations and have changed some of the, or have submitted for approvals of some of the measurements to actually be used as endpoints in clinical trials. And that has been very exciting. So I think, that change is happening. And of course, we're still going to be using our gold standards for now, but we are certainly augmenting it, and that's just going to grow and take more and more of an importance. And so I can absolutely see that at some point that will become a co-primary endpoint or something like that, sort of an important measurement in deciding whether a drug works or not.
Well, I think you've given everybody here a lot of hope for their own innovation, and that the prospects for innovation are still really very ripe, both here in the United States and in Europe. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Ian Philp. Ian, thank you again for being part of our conversation here today. And thank you for being part of it yesterday too. Ian runs and was the founder of a company called Age Care Technologies. And it's an assessment tool, it's a training tool, it's everything, and it's all online. So it's a perfect example of how caregiving and how education, what Chad talked about, comes together in an online platform. And I guess quickly, if you could help us better understand for the hackers, what's your biggest challenge as a founder of a new company that's based in technology? Is it scalability? Is it access? And how do you think technology is going to help you with this challenge?
Thanks, Nancy. And let me just, as Jay was showing us Chicago, let me just show you a picture of my back garden here in the UK. And greetings from the UK to you all. The technology is going to be the enabler, Nancy, in my view. And it's been around. I've been involved in big projects funded by the European Union and the UK government, looking at technology and aging in place and so on for the last 30 years. But I think there's been a rapid acceleration in the last 5 years towards the uptake of technologies. To me, the key to success is to focus on the things that really matter to older people. And it's actually sad to acknowledge that most of the time, most of what we do in health and care for older people is wasted because it's not spending the resources on the things that really matter to the older person. And so my life's work has been to try to reorient systems towards the things that really matter to older people themselves. And just to give you one very specific example of that, which is that 60 years ago, the problem of the unreported needs of older people was first reported in the Lancet. We are still in a place where the 90% of the world's population, 2/3 of the things that really matter most older people, go unreported. So my business in Age Care Technologies is to take a business model to level up the reporting of needs and concerns from the point of view of the older person. And then I think technology has a huge role to play in addressing these needs.
Thank you, Ian. And I'm sure some of the hackers are going to be more interested in talking to you about their technology too. And talking about the needs of older people, I want to move on to Molly Evans. And Molly is a senior policy manager at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. So your job, your business is in finding out the needs and serving the needs of older people, which is what Ian was talking about. And I guess my question to you is, how do you see technology have, oh, and by the way, you're also getting your PhD in gerontology. Brava, we're very excited. We want more gerontologists. And my question was specifically about gerontology. How do you see that as having an impact, technology having an impact in gerontology?
Sure. Thanks, Nancy. Really glad to be here this morning. Appreciate your having us. So really view technology, loved what Ian said about sort of focusing resources on the things that matter to the older adult. And I think that our work with the Executive Office of Elder Affairs in Massachusetts, we really think about empowering older adults. So giving them the tools to lead productive and meaningful lives in the homes and communities of their setting, and really letting them, drive and determine what that looks like, whether that's, in the realm of transportation or, family caregiving and care, behavioral health, all of that, and making sure that it's affordable and accessible. It's really important. But I think the other sort of guiding principle that is really important to think about is using technology and using the aging population and trends that we're seeing as an opportunity, because it really is. So.
Thank you. And I want to talk about a little bit with Catherine now about the transportation issue. Many of Catherine Downs, the policy director of the Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. How do you do? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Nancy.
Thank you. And there's many hackers here focused on the issue of transportation and mobility. And that's something I know that you're working with in your job. And I wanted to know from you how you see the impact of technology in the area of transportation, bringing healthier lives to older adults.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having us. We're really stacked on the Massachusetts side of the mentor table, I think. And I know that my and Molly's boss, the Deputy Secretary Robin Lipson, was part of the mentor crew yesterday. So just a pleasure to be here. Very privileged to be here. So when we think about transportation, I want to go back to something that Molly said, and I think Ian had teed up really nicely in terms of focusing on the opportunities and really looking at problems not from a challenge lens, but an asset-based lens. And so when we think about transportation mobility, we're all about helping people get from point A to point B, where do they want to go, when they want to go, and in the most kind of independent way possible. And so when we think about transportation, we are really thinking across that whole continuum, right? So it's not just about the fixed route, looking at buses, looking at trains, planes, automobiles. It's really about everything that surrounds that experience and includes walkability. It includes thinking about built environment and design. When you think about, even something like buses, one of the things that we've really been focused on in Massachusetts is creating age-friendly bus stops, which I'm sure everyone on this call, including the hackers, is really familiar with the World Health Organization age-friendly movement. And people are like, what the heck is an age-friendly bus stop? And it's like, well, really, everywhere in the built environment should be great for people who are 2 to 92, right? And so when you think about bus stops, if we want to increase ridership on a fixed route service that helps people go from point A to point B, we need to be thinking about is there a bench and a shelter? Is the sidewalk accessible? Is there a place to better understand, look at the signage, to understand what's going on when the bus is going to arrive? And we're trying to encourage communities to really think about every aspect of transportation and mobility and not just sort of the infrastructure components.
That's wonderful. I think that's a lot of information for people who are actually hacking on the transportation issue itself. I'm going to turn to Jyoti, who is an epidemiologist, speaking of the WHO and speaking of the age-friendly cities. I think it's a nice segue to you, Jyoti. Age-friendly cities is something that the WHO created how many years ago? I'm going to say 20 years ago. I think New York City, I can proudly say, was the first age-friendly city, and now there are thousands around the world. And it's really quite an amazing operation and achievement with criteria that other cities have to meet and are exceeding, which is really wonderful. A great way to bring the globe together, which is part of the work of the WHO. And I want to talk about the work that you do in particular in terms of ICOB and measuring, enhancing functional ability with older adults. Are you able to tell us a little bit about how you use technology to measure healthy aging?
Thanks, Nancy. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning.
To everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I think the part of WHO's challenge is that we want to shift this clinical paradigm from disease to function. So when an older person walks to a clinic, the clinicians are trying to look at problems. It's a kind of a off glass, empty or off glass is full paradigm. So the immediate impression the clinician gets is the off glass is empty. So you want to shift it. Don't look at the off glass is empty. Look at what is available, what is there in that person. So that's a big transformation for WHO to push that kind of agenda, because that's not just about changing the day-to-day routine of clinical practice. It's about changing the mindset and the entire curriculum of how the geriatricians are trained to treat older people. So to make that kind of transformation, I think WHO first did what WHO did is that created a framework for healthy aging. We actually said, if you're targeting older people, this is what we mean by healthy aging. So healthy aging is not about having a disease or not having a disease. It's about having a capabilities for older people to do the things that matters to them. And this capability may change from person to person. What makes that change, what explains the difference between person to person is the underlying biological changes older people go through. That doesn't happen at the same time, at the same rate in all individuals. And also the environment in which people live. So that also makes the difference. So what we did was we created this public health framework and we brought this healthy aging concept. WHO introduced a new definition of healthy aging. And we brought this concept to public health audience. And now the decade of healthy aging has been endorsed by 194 countries in the UN General Assembly last year. And we have a mandate to monitor and support countries in helping older people to monitor their own health status, how well they are aging, as well as support health system to monitor the population. I think COVID situation, many of you are aware, has exposed many fault lines in the health system. One of the major fault lines is the health monitoring system is quite weak. Even in high income countries, we have seen that. And there are typical examples where the countries have failed to monitor health of older person. And there was a lot of confusion where older people have been rationed based on frailty status. Everybody knows, nobody understands what is frailty. There is no definition of agreed definition or agreed measure to understand frailty. So in midst of all this, I think we are still trying to push this concept of healthy aging, and we want to strengthen the system and especially the monitoring system in order to measure healthy aging and monitor older people's health in a different conceptual framework. So the technology has a huge role in helping the health system to strengthen the current monitoring systems in place. The key aspect is that at the moment we have so many things going on. People collect. 2 years back, I was in Japan. I was visiting some of the smart homes, and people said everything the older person touches here gathers data. Then I asked the clinician, what can you do about this data? Oh, some of them gives us information on falls, some of them gives us information. So there is no coherence. So there's a lot of data can be collected to digital platform, but there is no framework or there is no visualization tool for clinicians or older people to take actions. For example, my iPhone may collect number of steps I take. What can you do about it? Number of steps I take every day. What can I say about it? Can that say anything about my health status in the future? That's a big question. So I think we have technologies in place and it's expanding so massively. The key challenge is how do you bring those technology and help the older people to monitor their own health status? That's very empowering. If they know, okay, this is my status now. If I want to change my trajectory, I'm going down, I want to go up. If I want to maintain it, I need to do following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a very empowering way to motivate people to remain healthy, even at the highest age group as possible. Second is clinicians are looking for, they don't have a time. In many countries where I have visited, they only have 2 minutes time to see an older person. And sometime before the person finished talking, they would probably written this prescription of what to give it to this older person, because there are 200 people waiting there and he has to finish his routine and go back and see another person. So I think in such settings where the technology has a huge role, a lot of data can be collected through wearable devices, can be collected through home-based monitoring systems. But again, the system is, how do you link the data with the health electronic system that's being collected in the health system? And how do you bring that kind of ecosystem in place that the public health system can actually benefit from, and also avoid certain catastrophe that we have experienced during the COVID in the last 1 year. So I think those are like a big questions where we are trying to work out, trying to find out what may be the best ecosystem to bring data from multiple sources. And second is, which framework may be more appropriate in order to make sense out of this data and give this data back to older people to take action and be in control of their own health status.
Thank you, Jody.
Answer your question.
I think that's, again, another place where our hackers could start to think about this system, this ecosystem of bringing all this data together and the viability of it in terms of a product and the commercialization of it, which brings me to my friend Ramesh, who is a business consultant to young people who are starting new businesses. Back to Boston again. Sorry, we're moving from Geneva back to Boston. And I wanted to ask you, $15 trillion market in the silver economy, as estimated by some people. Obviously, we need some help in bringing this all together. There's some smart people here participating as both as mentors and as hackers. Can you give me like the top 2 tips that you give to entrepreneurs who are thinking about this area? So something sort of a inside tip for these hackers.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Tala, for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And I don't know how many of the hackers or the mentors here are familiar with SCORE. SCORE is an organization. It's a countrywide organization that has got chapters in the United States in every major city. And there are 13,000 plus counselors who are mentors to entrepreneurs and people who are thinking of innovation and want to get going in business. I am one of the counselors in the Boston chapter. And yes, as Catherine and you have said, the reason why so many Massachusetts people are represented in your mentors is because not only do we have age-friendly cities, this is an age-friendly state. Some people talk of Florida being a waiting room for God to call you up there, but Massachusetts is not a waiting room. It's a place where older adults know how to live and know how to survive on their own and want to, as well as caregivers who want to help them. So Jose Ramos in the chat said, you don't have anybody in your mentors who's thinking about what the needs are of the people in the silver economy. And by the way, the silver economy exists not only in rich countries, but also in developing countries. And the needs for the individual are the same. The man and woman who grows old anywhere in the world grows old the same way, and we all have to go one day. The question here is, how can we help them? And how can we help each other? So as an answer to your question, SCORE in particular, the mentors focus on intergenerational counseling to help the younger people who want to help not only the world they live in, but also older adults. It also keeps you very young. When I am counseling a millennial, or doesn't matter, millennial, or even if it is somebody who's founding a new company at 50, what gets me going is their innovation and their ideas, because they're able to think about solving problems. So as Jyoti said, yes, there is a big problem in the ecosystem with data, but you know what? If I was to give 2 simple ideas to the hackers, A, think about your idea in terms of what problem are you trying to solve? What need are you trying to meet? And if you identify that and develop a strategy and plan properly, the other big thing you have to keep in mind is funding and money. And let me tell you, if you have a great idea and you think clearly, whether it's software, hardware, communications, or even a walking stick with some talking walking stick, as Jose said in this chat, if you have a great idea and you plan it all out, you will be able to find the money and know how to manage your money as you become an entrepreneur and you share your successes. One last point, and don't ever think that technology can't be disruptive. In my lifetime, I loved growing up with a camera and a Polaroid camera. Whoever thought that something called a telephone will really be the camera? None of you, some of you didn't even know that there was no social media before 1995. But the rest of the world went on, but now social media is completely changing the lives of every grandparent who is interacting with a grandchild through these COVID times. So there are lots of good ideas, and I'm so excited that the hackers over here and in this program want to make a change in the world.
Well, thank you so much. And we're excited too. I think something that you brought up, which is really important, and I think everyone echoes that, is that a lot of these solutions can't be done in a vacuum, and that the best audience and the best participants and the best helpers in designing these solutions are the end users. And I applaud all of our hackers who are going to now go into individual rooms with our mentors through our colleague Karen. And I encourage you all to introduce yourselves to each other and make sure that, if there's somebody who signed up for the hackathon who does not yet have a team, that you bring them into your team, especially if they're an older adult, because you'll really benefit from having that intergenerational work environment. People who understand the problems and understand what solutions work for them. So Karen, I'm now turning it over to you.